Hi, good evening. I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, still thirsty, a new snapshot on water-saving efforts in California. The critics who question San Diego's response to the drought.
On a mission to help the chronically homeless in San Diego County, I'm Tom Fudge. It's a unique partnership that helps them find support and shelter, plus the unexpected benefit for taxpayers. Also, the next test for the medical marijuana industry in California. New legislation to regulate dispensaries in San Diego and around the state.
And we're going to start on 3, 2, 1.
It'd been like, 10 years since I'd smiled or laughed.
Zapping depression with a medical device that looks like it belongs in a high-tech salon. The price of a magnetic treatment in San Diego. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Representatives from the city and county kicked off negotiations today with the Chargers to discuss building a new stadium. It comes just weeks after a task force proposed a funding plan to build the Bolts a new billion-dollar home. In a joint statement, Mayor Kevin Faulkner, City Attorney Jan Goldsmith, and County Supervisor Ron Roberts called the discussions productive. The meeting with Chargers owner Dean Spanos lasted more than an hour. Both sides agreed to meet again in the next several days. On the same day, we're learning more details on the new stadium in Carson. The San Diego Union-Tribune says the Chargers and Raiders paid $22 million for an 11-acre site to be used for parking. Tomorrow on KPBS Midday Edition, reading the tea leaves on the stadium negotiations, a closer look at the movers and shakers trying to keep the Chargers in town. What signs should we watch for? Join us at noon on KPBS Radio. Running dry in California, new water conservation numbers show San Diego has a long way to go to reach its state-mandated cutbacks. KPBS reporter Claire Trageser has the story.
San Diego cut its water use by 3.5% in April compared with the same month 2 years ago. The city is supposed to cut its water use by 16%. Matt O'Malley with the environmental group San Diego Coastkeeper says the city's lackluster performance is disappointing but not surprising.
All along we've questioned what the city's plan to this will be, and what's their response plan, how they plan on implementing the 16%. At this point, we haven't really got a good answer.
Other local cities, including Oceanside, Carlsbad, and Poway, all saw more than 10% cuts. But Rancho Santa Fe, the unincorporated area in San Diego County, notorious for its high water use, increased its water use by 9%. And Escondido's water use went up even more, by 20%. Claire Trageser, KPBS News.
And you can find more stories on California's drought and see how other folks are saving water in our special section, Running Dry. It's online anytime at kpbs.org/drought. Heading to the president's desk now, a new bill that would change the way U.S. agencies conduct surveillance and gather data. Today, senators approved the so-called U.S. Freedom Act. The measure will phase out the once secret National Security Agency, NSA, bulk phone records collection program. Former NSA contractor Edward Snowden made it public a couple of years ago. Now there will be a program that keeps the records with phone companies, but allows the government to search them with a warrant. President Obama is expected to sign that measure into law. An alarming report on airport security has led to a leadership shakeup inside the Transportation Security Administration. ABC News first reported that test agents were able to smuggle fake guns and explosives through TSA checkpoints. They did it 67 out of 70 attempts. The report led to the reassignment of the man in charge of the department. Changes include revising airport security procedures, retraining officers, and retesting equipment in airports across the country. San Diego school officials took a hard stance last summer on going soft. They cut the number of student offenses resulting in automatic expulsion from 15 to 5. KPBS reporter Megan Burks has this update on the experiment.
In August, the district gave principals more discretion in disciplining behavior like smoking, getting in fights, and possessing drugs. Today, sexual assault, possessing a firearm or explosive, brandishing a knife, and selling drugs are the remaining offenses that trigger an automatic expulsion. Since the change, San Diego schools have cut expulsions by nearly 60%. This time last year, administrators had heard nearly 400 expulsion cases and followed through in 134 of them. As of last week, the district heard 178 cases and handed down 58 expulsions. Now, the school district is embracing a strategy called restorative justice. It focuses on getting at the root cause of bad behavior and repairing relationships rather than sending kids home when they get in trouble. At Crawford High School in City Heights, that strategy plays out in a student-run peer mediation program. The students will actually train administrators from 5 other schools Wednesday at USD's Institute for Peace and Justice. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
A break for community college students. State leaders want to make it easier for them to transfer to a 4-year university like a UC campus. They announced a plan to simplify the process. Faculty leaders in the UC system are expected to sign off on the plan, easing graduation requirements for 10 of the most popular majors. The state minimum wage may be going up again. California's Senate has approved a plan to raise it to $13 an hour in 2017 and now goes to the Assembly. The proposal comes 2 years after Governor Brown signed legislation giving California one of the highest minimum wage rates in the country. It's currently $9 an hour and will go up to $10 next year. The California Chamber of Commerce calls the move a job killer. Many of San Diego's chronically homeless have spent more time in jail or the hospital than on the streets. They are the biggest users of emergency services in the county, costing taxpayers millions of dollars a year in public resources. Tonight, we meet an Army veteran who's gotten off the streets thanks to a program providing permanent housing for the chronically homeless.
If I wouldn't have gone to jail, I probably wouldn't have made it as long as I did. Jail probably saved my life.
At 57 years old, Tommy Facio can barely stand and needs a walker on wheels to get around.
I have degenerative arthritis, my lower 5 lumbar, and my upper spine, and my right shoulder, and my wrist, and both my feet, my knee, and both hips.
His severe physical disabilities were worsened from spending 8 years homeless.
In fact, I'm the only one I know who's even alive still. Everybody knows dead. My entire family, all my friends, everybody long dead.
Like so many chronically homeless, Facio also struggles with mental illness and alcohol abuse.
I was lying to the VA and telling them that I was suicidal, even though I wasn't, just to get a damn place to stay, just to get a roof over my head.
Facio eventually got help from Project 25, a pilot program started by the United Way to determine if offering permanent supportive housing really works in San Diego. Father Joe's Villages hopes to expand the housing program to serve more people.
But that is permanent housing for them. They meet certain guidelines as far as income is concerned, and if they meet those guidelines, they can't make more than a certain amount of money, income for the year, then they have the housing. The housing then is permanent.
Facio has been in his one-bedroom apartment now for nearly 2 years.
These guys actually put a roof over my head. I've heard a lot of BS since I've been in California. A lot of talk about this and that, and this actually happened.
Taking a closer look at this unique partnership that helps the chronically homeless find support and shelter, Tom Fudge has more on how Project 25 is doing in San Diego County and what's next for the program.
Project 25 is a public-private partnership with a mission of targeting chronically homeless people whose needs were great and who have been a huge cost to the city and county of San Diego. One year, a small group of homeless racked up millions of dollars in expenses between arrests, hospitalization, and jail time. Through Project 25, the partners, which include the United Way and Father Joe's Villages, say they've saved taxpayers a lot of money. They've also created opportunities for care and housing this group didn't see before. Joining me to talk about this are Mark Stevenson, Director for Project 25 at Father Joe's Villages, and Dolores Diaz with the Regional Task Force on the Homeless. And Mark, Project 25 began in 2011. Please describe the people you were targeting with that.
Well, there's a lot of homeless service providers in the city of San Diego that provide wonderful services to the chronic homeless. But the United Way had the insight to try to target a specific group of the chronic homeless who were the most highest cost and most frequent users of emergency services in San Diego. So we identified those folks by running lists with the hospitals and with EMS until we came up with a list of the 71 of the city's most frequent and highest cost users in the city of San Diego that were homeless.
Now, it's called Project 25. Did you eventually target 25 people, or was it more than that?
The name Project 25 came from the fact that the city of San Diego donated 25 sponsor-based housing vouchers for Father Joe's Villages to be the steward of in order to support the housing efforts. We served 35 people in the original project, and under a county-funded program called Telecare, they provided MHSA funds for the housing costs of the 10 additional folks. And then we ended up serving an additional person that was asked by the city medical director for us to serve, who was the highest user in the city of San Diego.
Okay, so 36 altogether. Now tell us how the program affected the taxpayer money that was going to this group.
Well, what we noticed over the years of 2012 and 2013, all said and done, we had a 67% reduction in emergency services use by this particular group by providing the services we provided. And that translated into about a savings to the community of about $3.5 million.
$3.5 million as a result of this. How would you say it affected the lives of the homeless?
Well, considering we were working with the people that were probably the most difficult to house in the city of San Diego, and considering that we were able to keep them housing, when they failed out of housing, get them into new housing because of the way the program had the freedom to be able to do this and follow these folks, it was a huge success. And the quality of life of those people improved as their emergency services and crisis situations decreased.
Dolores Diaz, tell us, who are the San Diego homeless?
You know, the homeless in San Diego have different faces. We're talking about individuals. We're talking about families, victims of domestic violence, youth. You know, it could be, it's children. The face of the homeless is quite diverse in San Diego.
What about the chronic homeless that was targeted by Project 25?
Well, we do a count every year, and we know that approximately 30% of those that are unsheltered are chronically homeless. They self-report being chronically homeless. So the population that Project 25 serves is kind of a subset of that. It's a small group of that that need that intense services.
Like health care for mentally ill problems?
Yes.
Dolores, has Project 25 had an impact that is larger than this group of 36 homeless? Has it had a larger impact on the homeless population?
Well, we're very proud of Project 25. It does set a model for, you know, saving taxpayer dollars. We do know that permanent supportive housing is cheaper than having someone be homeless and be using the emergency medical services on an ongoing basis and frequently using those taxpayer-paid services.
Okay, finally, Mark, Project 25 targeted a small number of people with a big array of services. Is that the model we should use?
It's the model, as Dolores was saying a minute ago, it's the model we should use for this particular subset that needs more attention. And because they couldn't get this attention with traditional service delivery systems, had fallen through the cracks at the cost of the taxpayers.
Well, Mark Stevenson, Dolores Diaz, thanks very much.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Upheld today a reduced prison sentence for a political ally's son. San Diego County DA's office says they will appeal the ruling. An appeals court upheld former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger's decision to dramatically reduce the manslaughter sentence for Esteban Nunez, the son of a former state assembly speaker. He pled guilty in the 2008 death of a student at San Diego Mesa College. On his last day in office, Schwarzenegger commuted Nunez's sentence to 7 years from 16. The DA's office sued to overturn the decision. On the health desk tonight, the treatment of major depression is not an exact science. Some people just don't respond well to medication or counseling. That's where a therapy called transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, comes in. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg takes a look at this treatment option.
The newest treatment for clinical depression isn't a drug or a type of psychotherapy. It's a medical device that looks like a high-tech hair dryer.
And we're going to start on 3, 2, 1. How's it doing?
Fine.
This treatment is called transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS for short. Every 20 seconds, this device generates magnetic pulses to the part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that regulates mood. The magnetic pulses are the same type generated by MRI machines. In TMS, the pulses create small electrical currents, which stimulate the release of mood-lifting chemicals in the brain. Patient Jay Martin says the treatments have been a godsend.
There's been a significant change in my whole outlook, both on life and just my general well-being. So I know it's been a big difference from where I was.
Martin has struggled with depression for decades. He tried counseling, numerous antidepressants, and even shock therapy, but nothing seemed to work for long. Martin says he felt like he was walking around in a black cloud.
I mean, it was just like you don't enjoy the normal things you would think. And it'd been like, 10 years since I'd smiled or laughed.
The FDA approved TMS for the treatment of medication-resistant depression in 2008. Since then, studies have shown some long-term benefits of the therapy. One study found 45% of patients had full relief from their depression at 1-year follow-up. TMS can cause headaches and muscle twitches. It can also cause a seizure, although the risk is quite low. Doctors at UC San Diego are using the newest generation of TMS machines, called Deep TMS. Psychiatrist David Feifel says the device sends magnetic pulses deeper into the brain.
The benefit of that, we believe, is that we're able to activate areas that are firing abnormally that are not reachable with the conventional TMS device, allowing us to produce a more robust change in the brain and ultimately to produce a greater effectiveness.
But this high-tech therapy comes at a high cost. A standard 7-week course of TMS treatments costs around $15,000. At first, patients are required to come in for a session 5 days a week. After about 30 days, the treatments are tapered off. Some, but not all, insurance plans cover TMS. Those that do require patients to try a number of other options first.
We use fitness in here. We have fitness classes, which are individual.
The cost of care isn't an issue for patients at the True Life Center for Well-Being in La Jolla. Here, patients undergo intensive treatments for addiction and mental health issues. These include counseling, drug therapy, and acupuncture. Executive Director Krista Roybal refers patients with severe depression to TMS. She says TMS isn't for everyone.
This is for a very select group who has been through usually more than one psychiatrist, sometimes up to 3 and above, and usually multiple medication trials.
Major depression extracts a heavy toll. It affects some 14.8 million Americans, and it's the leading cause of disability. The use of TMS for clinical depression is growing in popularity as more psychiatrists add it to their arsenal. Whether TMS will make a big dent in the problem nationwide remains to be seen. But for Jay Martin, it's made all the difference in the world.
And I feel like even if the insurance company refuses to cover anything, it was worth the expense just to be able to feel this much better.
Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
KPBS video journalist Nick McVicker helped produce that story. A quick clarification on an earlier story we just told you about. Oceanside actually cut its water use by 9% instead of 10%. Let's move on to an update of a story we actually reported last night. The State Assembly could vote this week on rules to regulate the medical marijuana industry. Tom Fudge finds out what the proposal may mean for dispensaries here.
California voters legalized medical marijuana nearly 20 years ago, but federal opposition and the lack of clear state rules to regulate it have made provision of medical marijuana a big legal problem. Members of the California Assembly hope to solve at least that second issue by passing AB 266. It would create a Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation. It would give the state the power to license dispensaries, to regulate the cultivation and transportation of medical marijuana, and to take steps to ensure the safety of the product. On the other hand, it would still allow cities to ban medical marijuana dispensaries. Joining me to talk about what may be coming are Alex Kreit, professor with the Thomas Jefferson School of Law, and Eugene Davidovich, who's a spokesperson for the Alliance for Responsible Medicinal Access. And Alex, thanks very much for coming in.
Great to be here.
You know, it seems like these rules are a long time in coming. Why has it taken the legislature so long to act on this?
Well, you know, I think really a lot of just political infighting. I mean, I think, honestly, in some ways it's been a mystery because California was a leader on this, passing the first medical marijuana law in 1996, and now we've really fallen behind the times. Most other states already have these kinds of regulations in place, so it's great to see it moving forward here in California.
Well, based on what you know, what do you think of AB 266?
So far, it sounds like, I think, a really good proposal. We're still waiting to get all of the language released, so obviously the devil is sometimes in the details, but from the information that's come out so far, it seems like a really good compromise between the interests of law enforcement, cities, patients, medical marijuana business operators, so I'm hopeful about it.
Why does the state need to get involved? I mean, what problem would that solve that local agencies haven't been able to solve?
Well, there's a lot of elements of medical marijuana that really need to be regulated at the state level. Cities like San Diego, they're not capable of regulating some of the environmental concerns, the testing of the product, the labeling, all these kinds of things. That's something that really the state should be taking care of.
Now, I think you've told me that Colorado has done a pretty good job of regulating medical marijuana and then legalized marijuana. Why do you think that is?
Well, because I think they really moved forward in a real way to put regulations in place early. Colorado, I think, really kind of was one of the leaders in having really, really good, clear medical marijuana regulations, and that translated over when they legalized for recreational marijuana in 2012.
Well, Eugene, you represent a medical marijuana trade association. How has this bill been received by growers and people who want to open dispensaries?
Well, as Alex said, the devil's always in the details.
I shouldn't say the bill, the proposed bill.
Yes, the devil is always in the details. We are closely monitoring this bill as it makes its way through the Assembly, and we are hopeful that this will, in fact, establish statewide regulations that will provide the very needed clarity for both patients, the communities, and the operators. Statewide regulations for cultivation, for manufacturing, for testing, that is something that the community has been asking for 20 years almost.
Given what you know, do you have any concerns about this bill?
Yes, we do. The ability for cities and counties to ban access locally is a problem. It goes to affect the people that this law was designed for, those that suffer from serious chronic conditions that cannot travel, in many cases, long distances. And if there is no access in their neighborhood, where do they get their medicine?
And so I assume groups like yours will be lobbying to change that provision?
We are working on it. We are doing everything we can, but it looks like this provision is something that will remain in the law, unfortunately.
Well, Alex, you know, it's no secret that supporters are gearing up to put medical marijuana, not medical marijuana, but recreational marijuana legalization on the California ballot next year. Now, I think you touched on this before. Do you think that this process with medical marijuana will affect that in some way?
Yeah, I think it's really, really important for if we're going to have recreational marijuana legalized, and I think it's almost certain we will if we look at the polling numbers, it's important to have rules of the road in place for medical marijuana. The experience with Colorado and Washington State has borne that out. Washington State, they didn't have rules of the road in place at the state level for medical marijuana before they legalized. They had a much harder time implementing legalization than Colorado did. It's just a lot harder to reconcile things if you don't have clarity at the state level for medical marijuana and then you want to legalize for recreational marijuana.
Well, Alex Kreit, Eugene Davidovich, thanks very much.
Thank you.
I'm Gwen Eiffel. Coming up on the NewsHour, Miles O'Brien kicks off a 4-part series cracking Ebola's code following the worst outbreak of the virus in history. That's later this week on the PBS NewsHour.
A special race through San Diego today had officers and athletes teaming up. It's the annual torch run for the Special Olympics. San Diego Police Department shared these photos. More than 400 officers from 30 agencies help with today's torch run. So far, more than $8,000 has been raised for sports training and competitions for Special Olympics athletes. The run continues tomorrow. We're looking at more mild weather on tap for San Diego. Primarily 60s along the coast with a mix of mostly clouds, some sunshine peeking through by afternoon. Same for the inland valleys, just a little warmer there with a mix of sun and clouds by afternoon. Sunny for the mountains, temperatures there in the upper 60s. A possible lightning storm for the desert on Friday with temperatures in the 90s. Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom on Morning Edition. A new education program in San Diego aimed at helping every educator become a great teacher. The snowball effect for the universities involved. That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.